My family tried to steal the cabin Grandpa left me, so I stayed silent and let my lawyer handle them. Now they're begging, but it's over. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and I recently inherited my late grandfather's cabin. To give some context, my grandpa and I had a special bond growing up. I'd spend every summer at the cabin with him. We'd go fishing in the mornings, read old adventure books in the afternoons, and listen to his wild stories by the fireplace at night. He taught me how to tie knots, use a compass, and appreciate the simple things. It wasn't just a cabin, it was our little world. When my grandpa passed, he left the cabin to me, specifically citing that I was the one who truly appreciated it. My family was initially supportive. They even told me he made the right choice. My parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins all said they were happy the place stayed in the family, even if it wasn't theirs. I went through all the legal stuff, made sure the title was in my name, and everything was above board. After sorting the paperwork, I took my first solo trip to the cabin. It's a bit old and needed some fixing up. Broken porch steps, a creaky door, and a leaky roof. Nothing I couldn't handle, though. I started documenting the repairs and posted a few updates on social media. You know, things like, "Today I replaced the porch steps and check out this view from the cabin." People seemed to enjoy the updates, especially my cousin Emily. She commented a lot, reminiscing about our childhood visits to the place. A few weeks later, Emily suggested it would be great to have a family gathering at the cabin, like the old times. I was hesitant, it's not a big place, and I wanted to keep it as a peaceful retreat, but I figured it would be nice to reconnect with family, so I agreed. Emily came over first, saying she'd stay for a couple of nights, but her visit stretched into a week. During that time, she started making all these comments, stuff like how it was strange that Grandpa left the cabin just to me, and how it would have been better if the whole family could have shared it. I brushed it off initially, thinking she didn't mean much by it. But then, during a family dinner at my parents' place, my uncle joked that I should be careful, or they might just take the cabin back. Everyone laughed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was some truth behind his words. A few days later, while cleaning out the cabin's attic, I found some old letters my grandpa had written. In one of them, he explained why he chose to leave the cabin to me. He said I was the only one who ever showed genuine interest in it. The rest of the family treated it like a vacation spot, but I treated it like a second home. That letter meant a lot to me, and I felt like I was honoring his wishes by keeping the cabin. But then the comments started rolling in. My aunt asked if I could host a big family reunion there. I turned her down, explaining that the place couldn't handle that many people and that I wanted to keep it as a peaceful retreat. She didn't seem too happy with my answer. Soon after, my uncle called, offering to buy the cabin from me at a fair price. He kept talking about how it would be a great way to keep the cabin in the family. I declined, politely but firmly. Things really blew up in the family group chat after I posted about planning another solo weekend at the cabin. Emily called me selfish for hogging a place that meant a lot to the whole family. I tried explaining that it wasn't about keeping it to myself, it was about preserving what my grandpa wanted. That only seemed to make things worse. My other cousins started piling on, saying that I should be more considerate and that it's not fair to keep the cabin to myself. What really stung was when my mom called me later that night. She didn't outright say I was wrong, but she mentioned that the family was disappointed that I wasn't sharing the cabin with them. She said they felt like I was keeping them from their memories with Grandpa. I told her about the letter, how Grandpa wanted me to have it because of the bond we had, but she brushed it off, saying I was taking things too literally. Then came the part where my uncle made another offer, this time more direct. He suggested a specific price for the cabin. He said it would give me a nice little boost for my future plans. I could tell he thought I'd jump at the chance, but I just told him I wasn't interested in selling. He didn't take that too well, said I was being stubborn and that the whole family was starting to feel alienated. It was getting awkward. After that, I tried to keep my distance, but the tension kept building. I'd post another photo from the cabin, maybe of the newly painted porch or a sunrise over the lake, and, like clockwork, I'd get snarky comments from Emily or one of my cousins. I found myself second-guessing everything I posted, wondering if I was rubbing it in their faces, but I wasn't going to give up the place that meant so much to me. I don't know, am I being unreasonable here? It feels like I'm just trying to honor my grandpa's wishes and enjoy a place that meant a lot to us, but now it's like my whole family's turned against me. It's hard to keep the peace when everyone thinks I'm in the wrong for wanting to keep the cabin as my own. After that initial blow-up with my family, I thought things might cool down, but it only got messier. My mom kept bringing up the same point whenever we spoke, how it's not fair for one person to keep the cabin when it's a family legacy. She even suggested that I should think about what Grandpa would have wanted. It felt like everyone was coming at me from all sides. Then my uncle threw another wrench into the mix. During a family dinner at my parents' house, he mentioned that he had spoken to a lawyer friend who thought the will might not hold up if someone challenged it. He said it casually, almost like he was talking about the weather, but it was clear what he was hinting at. It made me nervous. Was he seriously thinking of challenging Grandpa's will? After that, I decided to seek my own legal advice. I reached out to a lawyer and laid everything out, my grandfather's will, the title transfer, and what my uncle had said. The lawyer reassured me that my grandpa's will was rock solid. He explained that my grandfather's intentions were clear, and that legally, the cabin was mine. But he also warned me that family disputes could get ugly, even when the law is on your side. Things got even more tense at the next family gathering. My cousins, who used to be friendly, barely acknowledged me. It was like I had suddenly become an outsider. Even my aunt, who used to offer me leftovers to take home, didn't look my way. I could feel the cold shoulder from all sides. It made me realize that this whole situation had started to change the way my family saw me. Then Emily pulled a move I didn't expect. She posted on Facebook about how sad it is when some people put money above family values. It was pretty obvious who she was talking about, and she got a lot of sympathy from our extended relatives. People were commenting things like, "Family is everything," and "Some people just don't get it." It stung, and it was clear she was turning people against me. One night, after a late shift at work, I came out to my car and found a note stuck under the windshield wiper. It was a plain piece of paper with a typed message. "The cabin belongs to the family, not you." It didn't say who it was from, but it made me feel uneasy. Up until then, I thought this was just a disagreement, but now it was starting to feel personal. That's when I decided to install some security cameras around the cabin. I picked up a few that send notifications directly to my phone if they detect movement. I figured it was better to be safe than sorry. I didn't want anyone messing with the property when I wasn't there. It didn't take long for the cameras to pick something up. One weekend, while I was back in the city, I got an alert on my phone. It was a video of my uncle wandering around the cabin's porch. He walked around the perimeter, looking in through the windows, like he was inspecting the place. I watched the footage with a mix of anger and disbelief. The next time I saw him, I confronted him about it. He just shrugged it off, saying he was checking up on the property since I wasn't there. He made it sound like he was doing me a favor, but I wasn't buying it. I told him to stay away from the cabin, unless he had my permission. He just smirked, like he knew something I didn't. Things only got worse when I mentioned the incident in the family group chat. Instead of backing me up, most of my family sided with my uncle. They said he was just being responsible and that I should be grateful he was looking out for the place. Emily chimed in again, saying I was being paranoid and making a big deal out of nothing. It felt like I was losing any hope of getting through to them. Then came another surprise. I drove up to the cabin one weekend, hoping for a quiet break, only to find my aunt and a couple of my cousins having a picnic on the front lawn. They had spread out a blanket and were acting like it was a public park. When I pulled up, they just waved casually, like they hadn't crossed a line at all. I walked over and asked them what they were doing there, reminding them that the cabin was private property. My aunt rolled her eyes and said, "It's as much ours as it is yours." She wasn't aggressive, but there was a challenge in her tone. It was awkward and tense, but eventually they packed up their stuff and left. As they were driving away, my aunt leaned out the window and told me I was being selfish. I could hear those words echoing in my head as I walked back into the cabin. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was being paranoid. But the cameras, the note, my uncle's comments, it all added up to something that didn't feel right. It wasn't about me refusing to share. It was about boundaries, about respecting my grandpa's wishes. I talked to my best friend about the whole mess, and she gave me a reality check. She pointed out that my family was clearly overstepping. She reminded me that I had every right to set boundaries, especially when it came to a place that held so much personal value. She told me to stand firm and not let them push me around. It was a relief to hear someone say I wasn't in the wrong. That night, I decided to share everything on Reddit again. I posted about the incident with my uncle, the family picnic, and the note on my car. I asked people for advice on how to handle this situation without burning all my bridges. I wasn't sure what kind of response I'd get, but I hoped maybe someone out there had been through something similar. The comments started rolling in almost immediately, with a lot of people saying I wasn't crazy and that my family was trying to manipulate me. Some even suggested going no contact if things escalated. It was reassuring to know that others could see what I was dealing with, even if my family couldn't. After I posted the last update, things kept spiraling. It started with my parents giving me the cold shoulder. They stopped inviting me to family events. No more Sunday dinners, no calls just to check in. It was like I'd become a stranger. I found out through Facebook that they were hosting a barbecue, and everyone was there except me. My mom's always been the one to remind me about family gatherings, but now it seemed like they were going out of their way to exclude me. Around the same time, my cousins started texting me. Some were sympathetic, saying they understood where I was coming from, but wished I'd just let the cabin go. Others outright blamed me for the drama. They said I was being stubborn and that I was tearing the family apart over a property. It felt like pressure from all sides, but I tried to stay focused on what I knew my grandpa would have wanted. Then came the call from my aunt. She was in tears, her voice cracking as she begged me to let the family use the cabin, just for a few weekends. She said it would mean a lot to everyone and that this whole mess could be over if I just compromised. I didn't want to be heartless, but I knew if I caved now, they'd keep pushing for more. I told her it wasn't going to happen, and the call ended awkwardly. It was clear she wasn't going to forgive me for that anytime soon. Not long after that, I got a letter in the mail. My uncle was officially challenging my grandfather's will. The grounds? He claimed there was undue influence and that my grandpa wasn't mentally competent when he made his decision. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I called my lawyer right away, and he assured me the case was weak. He said that it's common for families to make these kinds of claims when they're unhappy with a will, but he also warned me that, even if it's weak, the process could drag out and become emotionally draining. My lawyer's warning proved to be right. The whole family, except for a few distant cousins I barely know, sided with my uncle. They framed it like I was the villain, the one keeping everyone from a piece of my grandpa's legacy. The story they were telling didn't match up with reality, but it was hard to change their minds. Suddenly, I was the bad guy in their eyes. Even my own parents seemed to buy into it, which stung the most. The legal battle started taking its toll financially. I had some savings, but with all the fees piling up, it was clear I'd need more. I started looking at selling my car, trying to figure out how to make things work without losing everything. I even cut back on small things, like my weekly coffee runs, just trying to keep my head above water. It was frustrating. This place was supposed to be my peaceful escape, and now it was turning into a nightmare. One weekend, when I drove up to the cabin, I found the side wall had been spray painted. The words "Family First" were scrawled across it in bright red. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It felt like a message, and not a subtle one. I called the local police and filed a report, but they couldn't do much without proof of who did it. They took some photos and told me they'd keep an eye out, but I could tell they didn't think it would go anywhere. I was left cleaning up the paint on my own, scrubbing the words off the cabin my grandpa loved so much. After that, I started having trouble sleeping. Every little noise at the cabin made me jump, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. Even when I was back in my apartment, I felt like I was constantly looking over my shoulder. My lawyer told me to start documenting everything, every interaction with my family, every strange incident, just in case things got worse. So, I did. I started keeping a notebook with dates, times, and details. Meanwhile, the support on Reddit kept me going. People flooded my post with messages of encouragement, telling me I wasn't crazy and that I needed to cut ties with my toxic family. Some shared their own stories of dealing with inheritance disputes, which made me feel less alone. It helped knowing there were people out there who saw what I was going through and thought I was doing the right thing. But it didn't make the tension with my family any easier. I decided to set up a meeting with my parents, hoping I could reason with them. Maybe if I laid everything out, they'd see my side of things. We met up at a neutral spot, a small cafe in town. I brought copies of my lawyer's notes and the letters from my grandfather, thinking they'd understand if they just saw the facts. But the conversation didn't go the way I hoped. My parents mostly sat in silence while I talked. When they finally spoke, they echoed my uncle's arguments. They said it wasn't about the money. It was about keeping the family together and honoring Grandpa's memory. They made it sound like I was the one being selfish. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, but their minds were made up. At the end of the meeting, I made things clear. I told them that if they continued to support my uncle's legal action, I'd have no choice but to cut off contact. It wasn't a threat. It was just the reality of the situation. I couldn't keep putting myself through this. My mom looked like she might say something, but my dad just stood up and walked out. I watched them leave, feeling a knot in my stomach. I went straight home and updated my Reddit post, sharing everything that had happened, my parents siding with my uncle, the vandalism, the lawsuit. The support and advice came in fast, with people telling me to stay strong and protect myself. But I couldn't shake the feeling that things were only going to get messier from here. After the last update, I thought things had hit rock bottom, but somehow my family found new ways to make things even more complicated. Out of nowhere, one of my distant cousins reached out to me. She moved out of state years ago, so we hadn't really stayed in touch. She messaged me on Facebook, saying she'd seen the drama unfold online and couldn't believe how the rest of the family was acting. We ended up talking for hours. She told me that, even before Grandpa got sick, he'd always been worried about how the rest of the family would handle his estate. He thought they were too focused on what they could get out of him, rather than caring about the cabin itself. She said he used to tell her that I was the only one who truly appreciated the place for what it was, not just as a vacation spot, but as a home full of memories. Hearing that gave me a much-needed boost. It was like getting a reminder that I wasn't alone in all this, and that maybe I was doing the right thing by holding on to the cabin. Not long after that conversation, the first court hearing took place. My uncle's lawyer came out swinging, trying to paint this picture of my grandpa being too frail to make a clear decision when he wrote the will. But my lawyer had all the documents in order, including medical records showing that my grandpa was of sound mind when he made his choice. The judge dismissed a few of my uncle's claims, saying there wasn't enough evidence to back them up. It felt like a small victory, but I knew it was far from over. When my family heard about the court's initial decision, they didn't take it well. My mom blocked my number, and my dad sent me a handwritten letter. He wrote that I was no longer their son, and that I should think about what I was doing before I tore the family apart completely. It was brutal. I just stared at that letter for a long time before putting it away in a drawer. As if that wasn't enough, I started getting anonymous messages online, accusing me of destroying the family and calling me a gold digger. I have no idea if it was my cousins or just random people who somehow got wind of the situation, but it was unsettling. Some of the messages were aggressive, telling me to give back what isn't mine. I reported the accounts, but they just kept coming. I tried not to let it get to me. In a weird way, the negativity gave me a kind of determination to prove them wrong. My grandpa's words, the ones my cousin shared with me, kept ringing in my head. I couldn't let them twist this into something it wasn't. This wasn't about money. It was about honoring what my grandpa wanted and preserving the place that meant so much to both of us. One of the users on Reddit suggested I set up a GoFundMe to cover my legal costs. It was tempting, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. It felt too much like admitting defeat, like I needed help because I couldn't handle this on my own. Instead, I focused on reading through the encouraging DMs I was getting from other Reddit users. A lot of people shared their own stories about family inheritance battles and dealing with toxic relatives. It helped to know that others had been through similar struggles and come out the other side. Then came another surprise. My uncle called me directly. He hadn't spoken to me one-on-one since this whole mess started. He offered to drop the lawsuit if I agreed to sell him the cabin for a fraction of what it was worth. He tried to make it sound like it was a win-win situation, but I knew better. He just wanted to get his hands on the cabin without going through the courts. I refused, and he didn't bother hiding his frustration. The call ended with a tense silence, and I knew there was no turning back now. A few days later, my parents showed up unannounced at my apartment. I hadn't seen them in person since the whole court case began, and they looked upset. My dad stood there with his arms crossed, and my mom had this desperate look on her face. They begged me to reconsider, saying that if I didn't, it would ruin the family forever. They brought up how much the cabin meant to everyone, and how this whole thing was tearing everyone apart. I listened to them, but I stood firm. I told them that my mind was made up and that I wasn't going to change it. They left, looking defeated, and I thought that was the end of it. But when I got back to my apartment door, I found a letter that my dad must have dropped on the doormat. It was another handwritten note, talking about how the cabin had been in the family for generations and how much it meant to my mom's parents and their parents before that. It was the kind of letter that tugged at your heartstrings, but I knew I had to hold my ground. With the final court date approaching, my lawyer called to say that we might have a shot at ending this sooner than expected. If the judge ruled in our favor, this could all be over. I don't know if I should feel hopeful or just braced for whatever my family might throw at me next. I shared all of this in my latest Reddit post. The messages of support and advice poured in again. People reminded me that I wasn't alone, and that standing up for what's right often comes at a cost. I'm trying to keep those words in mind as we head into the final stretch. Whatever happens, I just hope it brings some kind of closure for me and for everyone else. The day of the final court hearing arrived, and I walked into that courtroom feeling the weight of everything that had led up to this moment. My uncle and his lawyer were there looking confident, while my parents sat in the back, avoiding eye contact with me. My lawyer gave me a reassuring nod as we took our seats. The hearing was tense. My uncle's lawyer tried to hammer home the same old arguments about my grandpa's mental state when he wrote the will. But my lawyer countered with the documentation we'd gathered, including the medical reports and signed affidavits from Grandpa's doctors. The judge listened to both sides, but it didn't take long for him to make a decision. He ruled in my favor, dismissing my uncle's claims entirely. My uncle's face went red, and he stormed out of the courtroom without looking back. My parents followed him out, not even glancing my way as they left. I stayed in the courtroom for a moment longer, trying to process what had just happened. It was over. I'd won. But it didn't feel like a victory. As I walked out of the courthouse, I got a message notification. It was from Emily. She congratulated me on the win, but added a stinging comment, "Hope it was worth losing everyone." I didn't reply, just stared at the screen for a while before turning my phone off. It felt like a parting shot, a final reminder that my family wasn't going to let this go. Later that evening, I got a few unexpected messages from some distant cousins. They apologized for how everything had gone down and said they didn't realize how bad things had gotten. A couple of them even offered to visit the cabin sometime. I wasn't sure if I could trust their intentions, especially after everything that had happened, so I kept the conversations polite but distant. That weekend, I headed up to the cabin, needing some time away from everything. I sat out on the porch with a cup of coffee, staring out at the lake that my grandpa and I used to fish in. The air was cool, the sun reflecting off the water like a mirror. For the first time in months, there was a sense of quiet, but it was mixed with a sadness that I couldn't ignore. I thought about my family, about how things had changed, and about what this place really meant to me. It was supposed to be a retreat, but now it was a reminder of everything I'd lost. A few days later, I decided to try reaching out to my mom. I thought maybe, now that the court case was over, we could start to rebuild some sort of relationship. I sent her a message, just a simple note saying I'd like to talk whenever she was ready. I waited for a response, but it never came. I guess I wasn't surprised, but it still hurt. It felt like a final confirmation that things between us wouldn't be the same again. With the legal battle behind me, I shifted my focus to fixing up the cabin. It was time to make it my own. I started small, painting the porch, replacing some old floorboards, fixing up the fireplace that had always been the heart of the cabin. It felt like a way to honor my grandpa's memory, a way to keep his spirit alive in the place he loved so much. But even though I'd won in court, the problems didn't completely disappear. One afternoon, I arrived at the cabin to find one of the windows broken. A few weeks later, I found my car tires slashed when I'd parked near the trailhead. I reported both incidents to the police, but without proof of who was behind it, there wasn't much they could do. It felt like someone was trying to send a message, but I wasn't going to let them scare me away. I upgraded the cabin's security system, adding more cameras and motion sensor lights around the property. It was frustrating, feeling like I had to be on guard all the time, but it was better than feeling unsafe in the place I wanted to call home. To cope with everything, I started seeing a therapist. I needed help processing the anxiety, the feeling of being betrayed by the people who were supposed to support me. The sessions helped, little by little. I started to feel like I could breathe again, like I could find peace in the middle of all the chaos. While going through some of the old furniture in the cabin, I found a hidden compartment in my grandpa's desk. Inside were more letters from him, addressed to me. In those letters, he talked about how much he trusted me with the cabin, and how he knew I'd take care of it the way he would have wanted. It was like hearing his voice again, reassuring me that I was on the right path. It's been 6 months since the court ruled in my favor, and a lot has changed. The cabin is almost unrecognizable from the state it was in when I first inherited it. I've replaced the leaky roof, installed new windows, and even put up a fresh coat of paint on the outside. It's a mix of modern comforts and the old charm that my grandpa loved so much. I've also started a small garden out front. Nothing fancy, just some herbs and a few wildflowers. Watching things grow out here with the lake as a backdrop has become my little escape. Just when I thought things had settled down, my uncle made one last attempt to reach out. A letter arrived in the mail from him, written in a surprisingly calm tone. He suggested that we find a way to co-own the cabin, splitting the time between our families. He claimed it would be a way to move past the drama and make things right. I read the letter a couple of times before deciding the answer was still no. I wrote back, keeping it short, telling him that I appreciated the offer, but that I wasn't interested in any shared arrangement. I haven't heard from him since. My parents, though, have stayed completely distant. No calls, no messages, no visits. It's like we're strangers now. But after a lot of thinking, I decided to write them a letter. I didn't want to leave things as they were. I wrote about how much I miss them, and how I hope that, someday, we could find a way to rebuild what we'd lost. I didn't expect a response, and as of now, none has come. But at least I know I tried. I've been making the most of the cabin as a retreat. It's become a place where I can relax, invite a few close friends, and just enjoy the quiet. I even had my supportive cousin, the one who reached out when everything started going downhill, come up for a weekend. We sat by the fire, talked about old times, and shared stories about Grandpa. It felt like the start of a new chapter, one that wasn't defined by all the tension and hurt. One afternoon, I came back to the cabin from a run and found a bouquet of flowers on the front steps. There was an envelope with them, containing a short note that simply read, "I'm sorry." There wasn't a signature, and I have no idea who it was from. Maybe it was my uncle, maybe my mom, or maybe it was from one of my cousins who regretted how things turned out. Either way, I decided to take it as a sign that maybe, just maybe, someone out there realized how far things had gone. A few weeks ago, I decided to hold a small private ceremony at the cabin. I took some of the letters my grandpa had written me, the ones I'd found hidden in his old desk, and buried them beneath a large oak tree near the lake. It was my way of honoring him and letting go of some of the pain from the past year. I sat there for a long time after, just listening to the wind rustling through the leaves. It was the first time in a while that I felt a sense of real peace. Out of the blue, Emily reached out again. This time, her message was more complicated. She admitted that she regretted how things had gone between us, but said she couldn't let go of the anger she felt. She said that, in some ways, she understood why I held on to the cabin, but that it still felt wrong to her. I didn't know how to respond, so I thanked her for being honest and left it at that. It wasn't a resolution, but it was something. I decided to share some photos of the renovated cabin on Reddit. The response was overwhelming, with so many people commenting on how beautiful the place looked and how proud my grandpa would be. It was a good reminder of how far I'd come, from feeling like the whole world was against me to creating a space where I could truly breathe again. It also inspired me to do something I'd been thinking about for a while. I've started a small blog about life at the cabin. It's not much yet, just a few posts about the renovations, the small joys of living near the lake, and what I've learned about self-reliance. But it feels like a new purpose, a way to turn something painful into something positive. If sharing my story can help even one person find peace in nature or get through a tough family situation, then it's worth it. Then, last week, something unexpected happened. My dad showed up at the cabin. I didn't see his car pull up, so I was surprised when I found him standing on the porch. It was awkward at first. We just stood there, not really knowing what to say. But eventually, I invited him inside, and we talked. We didn't solve everything, not by a long shot, but he told me that he missed me, and that, despite everything, he wanted to try and understand my side of things. We talked for hours, going over old memories and all the things that had happened since Grandpa died. He didn't apologize, and I didn't expect him to, but there was a glimmer of hope that maybe, someday, we could start to mend things. When he left, I felt lighter, like the wall between us wasn't quite as high anymore. Looking back, it's hard to believe how much has changed in a year. I went from being scared to set boundaries with my family to finding strength in the solitude of the cabin. I've learned a lot about myself, about what matters, and about the kind of life I want to live. It hasn't been easy, and I know there's a long way to go, especially with my parents, but I'm ready to keep moving forward. It's been a wild ride, but I'm ready to close this chapter and focus on the new one that's just beginning. While I've lost a lot along the way, I found a sense of self-worth that I didn't know I had, and that's something I'll carry with me no matter what happens next.